Earlier this year, I submitted a question to Prime Minister David Cameron via an Al Jazeera Q&A forum. The full question, in which I outlined some of the known problems with the Iraq inquiry, was edited to allow Cameron to give a wholly unsatisfactory answer. The Iraq or Chilcot Inquiry was supposed to hold British officials responsible for crimes committed and immoral actions taken during the Iraq invasion. Heading the list of concerns was British involvement in torture, and as you will see from Cameron's answer, he vowed to take action.
Next question.
My question is this, Prime Minister. With the UN already having called for the US to investigate the torture that we now know for a fact to have taken place during the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions, will you act on any revelations of British involvement in torture? Extraordinary rendition of Rego 242.
Well, the short answer to that is yes, and I have already acted. There have been accusations, not that British people tortured anybody, but accusations of so-called complicity in torture. And that is why, when my government got in, we very quickly decided to settle all the outstanding cases against the British government and to deal with those, and then to set up, as I have set up, an independent inquiry by a respected judge, Justice Gibson, who's going to look into these accusations of complicity surrounding all the aspects of Guantanamo Bay, and we should act on the evidence. And I want Britain to clear any stain off its name in this area. I think that is extremely important. And it's important not just because we should be clear that torture is wrong and cannot be justified, but I also want to make sure that the security services in Britain, who do a very important job in keeping us safe, are not stuck in the courts pursuing legal actions, but are actually out there doing their work.
Recent revelations that MI6 have been working closely with the former Gaddafi regime in Libya reveal extraordinary rendition leading to torture. And given that Cameron had vowed to address British involvement in torture during the Iraq War, it seems incumbent upon him to also address this potentially far more ingrained condoning of torture. We can hardly vow to oppose brutal dictatorships and condemn their abuse of human rights, while we secretly work with them to enable these violations. Policy must be introduced to outlaw this kind of clandestine cooperation. Now, whilst Cameron has already vowed to investigate these revelations, it's easy to be suspicious of the integrity of these promises, as he has already begun to make excuses for this kind of rendition and complicity in torture, complicity that, as you've just seen from his answer to me, he has previously condemned. Cameron says, "It is important that nobody rushes to judgment. In 2003, 2 years after 9/11, you had the situation where there was a Libyan terrorist group that was allied to al-Qa'ida. At that time, our security services were working to keep us safe."
Torture is wrong and cannot be justified.
But this statement is a curious one from David Cameron, because the papers that were discovered in the offices of the former head of Libyan intelligence, Musa Kusa, implied that Britain was involved in the rendition of Abdel-Hakim Belhaj, who was at the time a member of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, a group that Cameron says was linked to al-Qa'ida. Now, Abdel-Hakim Belhaj is now a commander in the rebel forces which overthrew Colonel Gaddafi with British support. And he says he was held in isolation and regularly tortured during his 3 years in prison. So this does seem to prove what critics of the Libyan intervention have been saying for months, and that is that al-Qa'ida are mixed up within the rebellion forces, the exact same people that the British government were helping Gaddafi to suppress not years ago. But more importantly, it's a clear example of lies and hypocrisy from the British government when it comes to torture and extraordinary rendition. Now, David Cameron's already vowed to look at these revelations, but given the transparently dishonest way in which he has handled the Chilcot Inquiry, and the apparent confusion of motive and justifications for what MI6 have done, it is up to us to let him know that we know that this is not acceptable.